Wealth Attraction Research. War, WAR. Protectionism. You're listening to Wealth Attraction Research. War, Protectionism. Presented by Hakeem Alibokas Alexander on Wisdom Social Audio Inc. and Spreaker Social Podcasting. Presented for World Reading Club in association with exercisingyourmind.com and UniquilibriuM. This edition reading focus comes to us from The Little Book of Economics and How Money Works. First, we'll start with the boring stuff in How Money Works, or at least it might sound boring. I haven't gone through it yet, but we'll see what comes of it. This section is depreciation, amortization, depletion. The cost of a company's assets and its use of natural resources can be deducted from its income for accounting and tax purposes. Depreciation, amortization, and depletion allow the company to spread the cost. All right, this first part here is the boring stuff, as I said, which we'll see. All right. Now, getting into all of this economics and finance, I forget what day this is. This must be day 4 or 5. And I'm going to be going as long as it takes to get through not only both of these books, but now I've started on by Adam Smith, which I didn't read it on here, but I did do a reading on Callin as well as on Spreaker alone about Chapter 4 in Wealth of Nations, which was really eye-opening. It was about the origin and use of money. And check this out. This is a link that I've been looking for time, whereas people talk about, some financial experts, so on and so forth, talk about purchasing and investing in gold and silver and other precious metals. And a lot of people make the definitely valid point of you can't eat precious metals, right? Like, how is that real wealth? I always thought, of course, great health is the truest of all wealth, and part of that is the food that we eat. But there was an interesting part of the Wealth of Nations that I'll get into here first before continuing into How Money Works and the Little Book of Economics. And it's this fine distinction here that still has some more to be filled out, but this gives a lot of insight into precious metals and things like that. So here we go. It's in Adam Smith in Chapter 4 of the origin and use of money. He says, the word value is to be observed, or the word value, it is to be observed, has two different meanings, and sometimes express the utility of some particular object, and sometimes the power of purchasing other goods, which the possession of that object conveys. The one may be called value in use, the other value in exchange. The things which have the greatest value in use have frequently little or no value in exchange. And on the contrary, those which have the greatest value in exchange have frequently little or no value in use. Nothing is more useful than water, but it will purchase scarce anything. Scarce anything can be had in exchange for it. A diamond, on the contrary, has scarce any value in use, but a very great quantity of other goods may frequently be had in exchange for it. So you have value in use and value in exchange, and water and diamonds were used, which I think is brilliant, because that's the thing, right? Water has abundant uses, right? But some of the precious metals, in comparison, like gold and silver, have very little uses in comparison. Of course, gold and silver, we use them every day in electronics, and this book was published in 1776. So when he said diamonds have scarcity use, it's probably maybe before a time when they were using diamonds in drill bits and for other different types of things that diamonds are used for. But really, right, diamonds are just ornamental. So keep that in mind. There's value in use. So the word value, right? We have value in use and value in exchange. That's how we can look at different commodities. What is their value in use and their value in exchange? All right, continuing now on here again with how money works. We will take a look at depreciation, amortization, depletion. The cost of a company's assets and its use of natural resources can be deducted from its income for accounting and purposes. Depreciation, amortization, and depletion allow the company to spread this cost. Here we have calculating depreciation. A delivery company buys a van for $25,000. Over time, the vehicle will need to be replaced. The company can record the reduction in the value of the vehicle in its accounts as depreciation. So, over the years, the value of the vehicle at first, in year one, depreciation by $4,000 down to $21,000. Then year two, it's down to $17,000. Year three, it's down to $13,000. Year four, it's down to $9,000. Year five, it's down to $5,000. So it lost $20,000 in value. So, and that's the annual depreciation. Right, so the annual depreciation went down slowly but surely, and it looks like it went mostly by $4,000 at a time. Let's take a look. Yeah, so the annual depreciation is $4,000 at a time. So how do you do that? You purchase value minus scrap value over useful economic life in years equals the annual depreciation in dollars. So in this case, we would take the purchase value, which is $25,000, minus the scrap value, which is $5,000, over 5 years. And so 25,000, of course, minus 5,000 is 20,000, divided by 5 years equals 4,000. And that's how they got the annual depreciation of $4,000 a year. Calculating amortization. A company buys the patent for a computer design. The initial cost of this intangible asset can be gradually written off over several years and can be used to reduce the company's taxable profit. You know how much there's taxes are being talked about? That's because it's one of the most important things to consider here in your own personal life and your business. Again, remember, rule number one about taxes is it's your money, not the government's. And rule number two is the tax law is written primarily to reduce your taxes. That's right. 99.5% of the United States tax code is written to reduce your taxes legally, while only 0.5% of it is written to collect taxes from you. Calculating amortization. A company buys the patent for a computer design. The initial cost of this tangible or intangible asset can be gradually written off over several years and can be used to reduce the company's taxable profit. All right. The initial cost over the use divided by the useful life equals annual amortization. So the initial cost of the computer design is $21,000 over the useful life, which would be 7 years, and you get the annual amortization of $3,000. So of course you're wondering, well, where did those numbers come from? Well, the $21,000 is the amount that they give us here of what this fictive company paid for it, and then 7 years, you can only guess that it is also a fictional number of how much this company decided that the computer design will be useful for 7 years. So the initial cost of $21,000 for the patent for a computer design, and divided over 7 years, of which they've determined it would be useful, gives you an annual amortization of $3,000. I wonder if I look. Where's that other book? Okay, I'm not going to look at it now. It's going to distract me. I'm very distractible. All right. So then, finally, calculating depletion. A forestry company knows that it has a finite number of trees. That's the whole world, people. Depletion records fall in value of the forest with its remaining reserves as the product. Wood pulp is extracted over time. So depletion records, I'm sorry, I said records, but it should be records. That's what the slip up in my misunderstanding was. A forestry company knows that it has a finite number of trees. Depletion records the fall in value of the forest with its remaining reserves as the product, wood pulp, is extracted over time. So the cost minus the salvage value over total units times units extracted equals depletion expense. So in this case, the cost is $10 million minus the salvage value of $1 million over the total units, which is 60,000, times units extracted, 6,000, equals 900,000. So you have 10 million minus 1 million, which is 9 million, divided by 60,000 times 6,000 equals 900,000. So that's the calculating depletion. Okay, I know that's stuff. This whole book right here. There's only a little bit more to go before I get into the little book of economics, which I can't imagine will be any more exciting than this. Oh boy, how it works. Depreciation is used to calculate the declining value of tangible assets such as a machine or vehicle. It is a measure of how much the value of an asset falls over time, particularly due to use or wear and tear. That's the truck that they bought. Amortization is a term used in accounting to describe how the initial cost of an intangible asset, one without a physical presence, such as a patent, can be gradually written off over a number of years. Depletion is the reduction in value of an asset that is a natural resource. Unlike amortization, which deals with non-physical assets, depletion records the fall in value of actual reserves. It could be applied to coal or diamond mines, oil and gas, or forests, for example. Warning, warning, warning. Country differences. There are different ways of allowing for depreciation, and accounting methods vary from one country to another. When working out how much a company is allowing for the cost of depreciation, it is important to know which method is being used in its accounts. Purchasing versus leasing assets. Business owners have to make a choice between buying assets that they own but that will fall in value over time, or leasing equipment on which they will pay rent. As they do not own leased equipment, they cannot record its depreciation in value over time, and there is no depreciation charge to be used to reduce the company's taxable profit. 60% of the value of the average car, 60% is the value the average car loses after 3 years on the road. 60% is the value the average car loses after 3 years on the road. Just a little tidbit of some information there. All right, closing up the book about the how money works. The next section here is called smoothing earnings, and then cash flow. I'm really excited to get to cash flow. But let me put the bookmark in here and move on. I'm glad I'm able to get through this stuff without falling asleep right now. All right, so we have now the little book of economics. Let's see what boring shit they have in here for us today that I'm nevertheless going to learn no matter what. It's called Protect Us from Foreign Goods, Protectionism and Trade. That's right. Protect us from foreign goods. People like Chuck in Canada, and Truly Julie, and Ryan Allen, and Terry in England. All you foreigners. The United States. I'm just playing, right? No, that's what the title of this section is called. It's called Protect Us from Foreign Goods. Let's see what they have to say. Should be interesting, right? By the way, that was just a little cursory look at who's in the room. Hello, Chuck, Zoe, Truly Julie, Life with Etsy, Ryan Allen, Ryan, Terry, and Tasha Determined. All right. Let's see what do they have to say about that. In context, let's see. The focus is the global economy. The key thinker is Thomas Munn, who lived from 1571 to 1641. Before, in around 1620, Gerard de Malines, or Malines, in around 1620, Gerard de Malines argues that England should regulate foreign exchange to stop the nation's gold and silver from going abroad. After 1691, English merchant Dudley North argues that the main spur to increased national wealth is consumption. 1791, U.S. Treasury Secretary Alexander Hamilton argues for protection of young industries. 1817, British economist David Ricardo argues that foreign trade can benefit all nations. And 1970s, U.S. economist Milton Friedman insists that free trade helps developing countries. What the fuck is she yapping about over there so much? Jesus Christ. Fucking been like an hour. Shut up. All right, so let's see where we're at here. What nonsense. You know what's so funny? I'm not gonna, yesterday I was out in a bookstore in, I was in 3 cities today. I was in Richmond yesterday, and then I left Richmond this and went to Williamsburg to a Barnes & Noble on Main Street there. But I didn't really like it, plus my signal on one of my devices was horrible and I couldn't update things and do stuff. So then, because I'm meeting Christopher Birkenbein in Newport News tomorrow, I drove to Newport News, where I'm at now. And both yesterday, while I was there, it was like these guys sat down like 5 feet away from me and were just laughing as loudly as they can about whatever nonsense they were talking about. And it took all that I could possibly muster in me, like to not be distracted by it. It was really an exercise in concentration when there's just like meaningless raccoon chipmunk like chattery nonsense for no reason about stuff that, of course, it doesn't matter to me. I'm sure it matters to them, right? But it's just like so freaking funny. All right. Let's see. Protect us from foreign goods. Protectionism protect me from myself, Hakeem. Protect me from being annoyed by things that I shouldn't be annoyed about. How does that serenity prayer go? Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the strength to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. All right. For the last half-century, many economists have championed free trade. They argue that only by removing restrictions on trade, such as tariffs, can goods and money flow freely around the world and global markets develop without inhibition. Some disagree, arguing that where there is a huge imbalance of trade between 2 countries, it can impact jobs and wealth. A mercantilist view. The argument over free trade dates back to the mercantilist era, which began in Europe in the 16th century and continued until the late 18th century. With the rise of Dutch and English seaborne trade, wealth began to shift from southern Europe toward the north. This was also the age when nation-states began to emerge, along with the idea of wealth of the nation, which was measured by the amount of treasure, gold and silver, it possessed. Mercantilists believed that the world drew from a limited pot, so the wealth of each nation depended on ensuring a favorable balance of trade in which more gold flows into the nation than out. If an excess of gold flows out, the nation's prosperity declines, wages fall, and jobs are lost. England sought to cut the outflow of gold by imposing sumptuary laws, which aimed to limit the consumption of foreign goods. For instance, laws were passed restricting the types of fabric that could be used for clothes, reducing the demand for fine foreign cotton and silk. Right? Just like one of the things the United States wants to do is reduce their demand for foreign oil, right? which is one of the reasons why many places are going to electric vehicles, supposedly. All right. Malines and Munn. Gerard de Malines, 1586 to 1641, an English expert on foreign exchange, believed that the outflow of gold should be restricted. If too much flowed out, he argued, the value of English currency would fall. A country's wealth is its gold. Exports bring in gold. Imports of foreign goods cause gold to be lost. A country should preserve its stock of gold by restricting imports. Protect us from foreign goods. So says that little flow chart. So again, the fewer imports that go out, the fewer gold the fewer imports that come in, the less gold that we lose, supposedly, right? So that's the idea, and protectionism. All right. However, the century's greatest mercantilist theorist, Englishman Thomas Munn, insisted that what matters is not the fact that payments are made abroad, but how trade and payments finally balance out. Munn wanted to boost exports and cut imports through more frugal consumption of domestic products. However, he saw no problem in spending gold abroad if it was used to acquire goods that were then re-exported for a larger sum, ultimately returning more gold to the country than had initially been spent. This would boost trade, provide work for the shipping industry, and increase England's treasure. Free trade agreements. Ooh, we hear those words all the time, don't we, everybody? Free trade agreements? All the time. Free trade agreements. What the hell do they mean? All right, well, this is what a free trade, at least back in the day of Adam Smith. In the 18th century, Adam Smith, which I just read Wealth of the Nations, 3 chapters yesterday, right? So in the 18th century, Adam Smith was to disagree with this view. What matters, he insisted, in the Wealth of Nations, is not the wealth of individual nations, but the wealth of all nations. Nor is the pot fixed. It can grow over time, but only if trade between nations is unrestricted. If left free, Smith insisted, the market would always grow to enrich all countries eventually. Hey, free market capitalism. For the last half century, Smith's view has dominated because most Western economists argue that restrictions on trade between nations hobble their economies. Today, free trade areas such as the EU, European Union, ASEAN, Association of Southeast Asian Nations, and NAFTA, the North America Free Trade Agreement, are the norm, while global organizations such as the World Trade Organization, WTO, and the International Monetary Fund, IMF, urge countries to reduce tariffs and other trade barriers to allow foreign firms to enter their domestic markets. The creation of barriers to foreign trade is criticized now as protectionism. However, some economists are concerned that exposure to large global businesses has the potential to damage developing countries who are unable to nurture infant industries behind protective barriers, as the U.S., Britain, Japan, and South Korea did before they became economically powerful. China, meanwhile, pursues a trade policy that in many ways echoes Munn's thinking by running large trade surpluses and building up a huge reserve of foreign exchange. Thomas Munn, born 1571. Thomas Munn grew up in a family of wealthy London merchants. His father died when he was 3, and his mother married Thomas Cordell, who became a director of the East India Company, Britain's largest trading company. Munn began as a merchant in the Mediterranean. In 1615, he became a director of the East India Company. His ideas were developed originally to defend the company's export of large amounts of silver, on the grounds that this generated re-export trade. In 1628, the company appealed to the British government to protect their trade against Dutch competition. Munn represented their case to Parliament. He had amassed a considerable fortune by the time he died in 1641. Key words, or key works, from Thomas Munn. In 1621, A Discourse of Trade. And around 1630, England's treasure by foreign trade. Huh. All right, Mun. Well, there's some key points here, of course, about this protectionism. And, Adam Smith is mentioned over and over again. I'm glad that I have Wealth of Nations here because it's actually very eye-opening. Even much more clear than some of these newer books on money, economics, finance. And, there's a lot to go in here. But one of the key things to think about here is these two different ideas about the word value. One meaning value in use, and the other is value in exchange. Like, for example, water has an abundant amounts of uses but can scarcely be traded for anything else, at least not until we go into a Mad Max world, right? And a diamond has scarce uses but has abundant value in trade. People will trade a lot of stuff for diamonds. So diamonds are basically money, right? Because you can exchange them for things. But you can't really use them for much, except for bling-blinging. Whereas water, although it's got a high amount of use, can scarcely be exchanged for anything else. Like, you can't really trade water for a watch, right? Even though it has abundant uses and is needed everywhere. So those two ideas about value in exchange and value in use. Use value or exchange value. And that's from Wealth of Nations, which I read the first 3 chapters here on Wisdom and Spreaker yesterday. And, as well as a little bit of Machiavelli, the first 3 chapters from The Prince. And chapter 4 of Wealth of Nations was read, which is where I got the use value and exchange value from, was from chapter 4 of The Origin and Use of Money. And, and now, of course, we had Little Book of Economics and How Money Works. So I'll drop this here, and I'm going to keep it in small sections and open up the next one, which will be, of course, in the Little Book of Economics. We have The Economy Can Be Counted, which is measuring wealth, which should be a good one. And then also in How Money Works is coming up, Smoothing Earnings. So good, we're getting closer to some stuff that's going to be a lot more interesting to me and maybe even more useful in order to do some alchemical and money magic here. So you've been listening to Wealth Attraction Research, WAR, W-A-R, Protection, presented by Hakeem Alibokas Alexander on Wisdom, Social Audio Inc., and Spreaker, Social Podcasting, presented for World Reading Club in association with ExercisingYourMind.com and UniquilibriuM.